Hello, Motorsports fans. Welcome back to A Motorsports Addict, the podcast where we break down all the action, drama, and thrills from the exciting world of motorsports. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most pivotal moments in the 2024 MotoGP season. Jorge Martin's stunning victory in the Misano sprint race. Now, this was a race result that shocked many people, including me. Martin's win over the pre-race favorite Pecco Bagnaia was not only unexpected, but it could also be a major inflection point in the title race. Today, we'll talk about Jorge Martin's stunning victory and what it means for the championship fight, and why Bagnaia's title defense just got a lot more complicated. Before we dive into it, I want to plead for your support for this channel. I want to remind you to please give this episode a like. It really helps get the word out and supports the channel. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. I love creating this content, and your support motivates me to keep going. Also, it would be wonderful if you could please share this episode with your fellow motorsports fans. The more we are, the merrier indeed. Thank you very much. Now let's get into it. Jorge Martin's victory in the Misano sprint race wasn't just a win. It was a tactical masterclass and a pivotal moment in the MotoGP title race. To fully appreciate how important this win was, let's take a look at the broader context of the championship fight. Coming into the Misano round, the title race between Jorge Martin and the reigning champion Pecco Bagnaia was incredibly close. Martin had opened up a 23-point lead over Bagnaia, largely thanks to Pecco's struggles at the previous round at the Aragon GP. You'll recall that Pecco had a pretty abysmal run in the sprint race due to a very poor start and the low grip tarmac conditions, which caught out every rider apart from the great Marquez. Pecco finished 9th in the sprint race, but the real disaster occurred during the main Grand Prix on Sunday afternoon. Pecco was involved in a horrendous crash with Alex Marquez, which took them both out of the race. Both riders were actually lucky to escape serious injury in that accident, which was ruled as a racing incident by the stewards. Misano, though, was expected to be Pecco's chance to claw back that lead. And let's be real, Misano is Pecco's track. Historically, he's been dominant here. The smooth, flowing corners of the Marco Simoncelli circuit suit his riding style perfectly. In fact, heading into this weekend, most experts and fans predicted that Pecco would be the man to beat. And he set about proving this very early in the weekend. He qualified in pole position, which only reinforced these expectations. This year, the MotoGP Championship will be hosting back-to-back races at Misano. And given Bagnaia's record here, it was thought that he would score enough points over the 4 races to drastically reduce Martin's lead. Things looked even more promising after qualifying, because lining up alongside Pecco on the front row of the grid were his VR46 Academy teammates, Marco Bezzecchi and Franco Morbidelli. I mean, if you asked Pecco to give you his dream lineup for Misano, he would have said himself in pole alongside Bez and Franco, with Martin in 4th or 5th place. And this is exactly what he got. It was expected that Bezzecchi and Morbidelli would play a supporting role, possibly helping Bagnaia by either slowing down Martin or at least putting up a significant challenge to hinder his progress through the field. Even though Pecco and Bez and Morbidelli race for different teams, it's always believed that their bond as members of the VR46 squad, where they have grown up together, where they train together, where they more or less live together, under the mentorship of the great Valentino Rossi, would be so strong that they would support each other over and above everything else. I have no doubt that Pecco had a plan. It was all about getting away cleanly, putting the hammer down, and controlling the race from the front. But as we all know, things never go according to plan, especially in this case. On the other hand, Jorge Martin qualified in fourth place on the second row of the grid, which is not ideal, especially on a track like Misano, where overtaking is notoriously difficult. For Martin, the key to victory was simple but challenging. He had to nail the start. If he could get a great launch, he might avoid getting stuck behind Pecco's allies, Bezzecchi and Morbidelli, and at that point stand a much better chance of taking the fight to Bagnaia. But he had to make a clean start, and he had to get ahead of the VR46 boys as fast as possible. It's important to note that Franco Morbidelli is actually Jorge Martin's teammate at the Pramac Ducati team, but he's also a VR46 squad member. And you'd sort of bet that if you had to judge where his loyalties lay, Morbidelli would back Bagnaia ahead of his own teammate, Jorge Martin. What do you think about this? Please let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Morbidelli would support Jorge Martin, his teammate, or do you think he would support Pecco Bagnaia, his VR46 squad mate? Let me know what you think in the comments, please. Thank you. Of course, things went according to plan for Jorge Martin, as we now know. The race start was the turning point. Jorge made an absolutely astonishing launch from fourth on the grid, better than anyone else around him. By the end of the very first lap, he had overtaken Bagnaia and taken the lead of the race. In fact, by some miracle, Jorge Martin was in the lead by the time they had navigated the second corner of the race. This was crucial because Misano is a track where it's extremely difficult to overtake. So getting out in front early gave Martin the ability to control the race, to dictate the rhythm, and keep Bagnaia behind him. For Bagnaia, the start was absolutely disastrous. He admitted after the race that his launch off the line wasn't good enough, and that gave Martin the window he needed to jump into the lead. Pecco tried everything he could to make up for the poor start. He tried to put pressure on Martin, hoping to force a mistake or crack his concentration, something that's happened to Jorge a few times this season. If you can remember, at both the Spanish Grand Prix in Jerez and the German Grand Prix at the Sachsenring, Pecco was able to capitalize on Jorge Martin's errors to take victory. But today, not happening. Jorge Martin rode a flawless race. He maintained his lead lap after lap, showing remarkable consistency under immense pressure from the reigning world champion. I have to say, I was personally worried that the pressure might get to Martin, especially given how much was at stake in the title race. But today, he showed a level of maturity and composure we haven't always seen from him. As the race unfolded, it became clear that Bagnaia simply couldn't close the gap. Martin's pace was just too strong. By the time we got to the final laps, Jorge had built a commanding lead, and Bagnaia himself was at risk of crashing out. Bagnaia never got close enough to challenge for the lead, and Martin crossed the finish line to take his 5th sprint race win of the season. The victory was massive for the championship. Martin's lead in the championship race has now grown from 23 to 26 points, and this was supposed to be Pecco's weekend. Misano was supposed to be the circuit where Bagnaia would close the gap or even regain the championship lead. Like I said earlier, this year, Misano is a doubleheader, 2 sprint races and 2 Grand Prix races. And so theoretically, if all went according to plan, Bagnaia could have left Misano back on top of the standings, especially with his squad members around him. I'm very certain that Bagnaia's team would have been licking their lips at the prospect of 4 races at Misano. Instead, Martin has managed to extend his lead even further. Wow. This is the kind of result that can swing a championship. For Pecco, it's not just about losing points. It's about losing momentum. When you're in a title fight like this, especially against someone as fast and hungry as Martin, every race matters. Bagnaia has won more on Sundays, while Martin has often dominated the sprints. But Pecco can't afford to keep giving up points in these short Saturday races. Let's also talk about the rest of the field for a moment. Franco Morbidelli managed to hold on to 3rd place, securing his first sprint podium since the format was introduced last season. It was a strong performance from him, but it was clear that he and Marco Bezzecchi weren't able to execute the expected protection plan for Pecco. In fact, Bezzecchi had a nightmare race. He fluffed his start, dropping from 3rd to 8th, and then crashed out completely with 9 laps to go. His teammate Di Giannantonio also crashed in the early stages of the race. And so it was a very mixed result for the VR46 squad. I have no doubt that the VR46 squad will be hoping for a much better start from Morbidelli and Bezzecchi tomorrow, so that they can better play the rear gunner role for Pecco Bagnaia. Enea Bastianini put in a strong performance to finish 4th, making it a perfect 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the GP24 Ducati machines. But he wasn't a factor in the fight for the win at all. Meanwhile, Marc Marquez, who gave us that incredible victory last weekend at Aragon, could only finish 5th today after a tough qualifying session. He didn't have the pace to challenge the frontrunners, but he proved that it is actually possible to overtake at Misano by putting a few firm passes on the riders around him. Marc was involved in a very lively race with the KTM riders, who were riding in a formation led by Pedro Acosta, followed by Brad Binder and finally Jack Miller. Marc passed the KTM riders one by one, leaving them no room to come back at him. Marc also gave us some late race drama with a last lap overtake on rookie Pedro Acosta to steal the 5th position. That move was very aggressive, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if there are some ruffled feathers there. Pedro might be looking for some payback in tomorrow's Grand Prix, if he gets a chance to do so. Marc was once again the lead GP23, ensuring that the Ducatis secured the top 5 places in today's race. And of course, we can't ignore the fact that Misano was a very challenging track for many riders today. Track limits warnings were flying left and right, with more than half the field being penalized for pushing too far. Augusto Fernandez even ended up with a 3-second time penalty after botching his ride through the long lap section, which dropped him down to 16th place, which just shows how tricky and unforgiving this circuit can be. Now, let's look ahead to tomorrow's Grand Prix. This is Pecco's chance to strike back. He needs to find a way to capitalize on his strengths at this circuit. Misano is still one of his favorite tracks, and he'll be desperate to make up for today's disappointment. And let's be honest, Pecco has to start winning again if he wants to keep his dream of a 3rd consecutive title alive. The title race is far from over, but the pressure is mounting. And I think at this stage in the season, the pressure is more on Pecco Bagnaia than on Jorge Martin. Pecco cannot afford to keep dropping points to Martin, especially with the season winding down. Every race from here on out is critical, and Ducati must be feeling the tension. Let's not forget, if Martin wins the title, he will take that coveted #1 plate to Aprilia next season, which is something Ducati absolutely doesn't want to see happen. So what do you think happens? Do you think Pecco has what it takes to close out this season? Can he win the championship again? Or do you think Jorge Martin will finally win his first MotoGP World Championship? Can Pecco bounce back tomorrow in the Grand Prix and keep his title hopes alive? Or is Jorge Martin on course to pull off one of the biggest upsets in recent MotoGP history? And how about Marc Marquez? Can we see another late race charge from him to spoil the party? Please let me know what you think in the comments. Can the VR for the six boys turn their fortunes around tomorrow and help Pecco secure a crucial victory over Jorge Martin? More than just the win, can they also push Jorge Martin down the order so he can lose more points to Pecco? This can only happen if as many of them as possible finish between Martin and Pecco, assuming that Bagnaia is able to beat Martin tomorrow. Frankly, based on what we saw today, we can't be certain. Has Martin scored an important psychological blow over Pecco by beating him at one of his favorite racetracks? Who can tell? We all know that mental strength is an important part of the World Championship. And on the evidence, it would appear that the advantage lies with Jorge Martin at the moment. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please drop me a comment and let me know who you're backing in this championship fight. Do you think Pecco can turn this title race around again? Or is Jorge Martin just too strong right now? Remember, Bagnaia has been in this situation before. Last year, he held a seemingly commanding lead in the World Championship until he crashed out and he had to rebuild his title challenge. Of course, he was able to secure the win, and I'm sure he feels sure that he can beat Martin again. But Jorge is also spoiling for revenge. And after the way he was treated by Ducati, he will want to inflict maximum pain. And what better way to hurt Ducati than to win the title on their factory bike and then hang the #1 plate on his shiny new Aprilia next season? If there's a team that Ducati do not want to be in this position, it is their Italian rivals Aprilia. The stakes are very high indeed. I know it's tempting to look at the 3 remaining Misano races as a block, with Pecco still being held out as a favorite to win and force a swing in the title race. But I think Pecco should simply take it one day at a time and focus on the next challenge, rather than putting himself under pressure to win the entire block. I think it's a time to go back to the basics and take it lap by lap, race by race, until the very end. He can still win it all, but he needs to revert to the methodical, focused version of himself and avoid putting too much pressure on his performances over the next 2 weekends or so. And so we come to the end of another episode. I'm so excited for tomorrow's race, and I hope you are too. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and please hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next episode. The MotoGP title race is heating up, and you won't want to miss a single moment of the action. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope to see you again after the race tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and enjoy the racing. Thank you very much and have a good night.